It's because that's something. There we go. Because that's something that I always do is I always forget. So anyway, hi, my name is Selena Johnson. Most of you know me. I am a certified dog trainer here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I specialize in service dogs, but I also train pet dogs and reactive dogs. I have a certification with the Certification Council of Pet Dog Trainers and also the Family Dog Mediators. All that to say is just saying that I know what I'm talking about. And that, I'm always learning about things. However, right now I train service dogs for disabilities such as PTSD, autism, and POTS. I am slowly expanding as I learn more, but those are kind of my fortes. However, we'll be talking about a wide variety of service dogs that we have. So this is Steve. Steve is a lovely golden retriever. We'll talk a little bit about breed as we go on. But basically, this is going to be a very general webinar on what a service dog is and a service dog right for you? Because just because you're disabled, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the right course of action. Just like any treatment plan, some treatments are better than others, and some treatments fit people better than others. So here's Alfie. So Alfie is a really wonderful Labrador who has now since graduated from my program. So what is a service dog? These dogs are specifically trained to assist with a disabled handler with their disability. It can take a total of 2 to 3 years to train, and they are for one person only. So it's really, really common for me to get questions that are talking about, we have multiple people who are disabled in our household. Can we train a dog to assist all of us? And unfortunately, if you think about it, that's a lot of work for one dog. So unfortunately, it has to be one handler, and it's a very long process. So training a service dog is not quick, it's not easy, but it is very fulfilling. And if you like training animals in general, doing a owner trained or privately trained route might be an option. But what's even more important is that they are here to assist a disabled handler. So you must be disabled. Now, the ADA does define disability as a person having one or more functions or limited functions that affect their life. So, you don't need to be on Social Security. You don't need to have an official disability diagnosis, but you have to be limited in some way. Whether, that's, oh, I can't go to the grocery store by myself, or, I can't care for myself in certain ways, those would define a disability. But you don't need to have any diagnosis or anything specific. So it's pretty broad in general. So, therapy dogs or emotional support animals, everybody's favorite topic. Therapy dogs and emotional support animals and service dogs are not the same. They are all different. This is Toaster. I love Toaster. Toaster was one of my pet dog students who took my class. He is not a working dog, he is very much a pet dog. Um, they all play very important roles in our world, but they're all just slightly different. Also, just so you guys know, Toaster's parents actually have a shirt that has says Toaster with Toaster's picture on it. It's amazing. They also gave me a Christmas card, and it was really lovely. I love getting Christmas cards. Um, so here we have the difference between a service dog, an ESA, or a therapy dog. So when we're talking about, is this right for me? Something to consider is also an emotional support animal. So for housing, for example, service dogs can be in non-pet friendly housing, but so can emotional support animals. So both are to assist a disabled person. However, therapy dogs are not for disabled people. A disabled person can have a therapy dog, but their purpose is not really to assist anybody who is disabled, so therefore they're not a disability accommodation. Um, because of housing, they can be any species. So there are people who have things such as service cats. There are ESAs that are lizards and fish. The Fair Housing Act does not say what an assistant animal has to be. So, if you don't need public access and just need help at home and you find that your cat can task for you, that is a very, very valid assistance animal. Now for flying, unfortunately, flying is cut down to dogs only. As of 2021, they amended the law, and so now emotional support animals cannot fly anymore. Therapy dogs also cannot fly because, again, they aren't for a disability accommodation, so they don't get any special rights. For public access, so this is your grocery store, this is your Walmart, your Target, your Costco, this is going to the amusement park or any non-pet friendly specific space. Um, the ADA would be that law. Now, service dogs, they are allowed in most places, and we're going to play a fun game in a second. Um, Emotional support animals are not allowed. So this is one of the biggest things that I talk to a lot of people with is that, if you don't require assistance from an animal in public, an ESA might be a more affordable and might be something that would help you a bit more than a service dog. Um, but they are not allowed in, non-pet friendly spaces. However, fun fact, in Pittsburgh, they are allowed on the public buses. For whatever reason, Pittsburgh says that they are perfectly fine to take public transit here. I do believe pets should be able to take public transit because not everybody owns a car, but it's just a little fun fact. And if you're ever interested in what the laws are yourself, there is a few sources down below where you can read the laws yourself. So now I'm going to unmute everyone. We're going to play a game on whether or not a service dog is allowed in this area. You can type it if you would like. You can speak it out loud. Either one is perfectly fine. So I'm going to, let's see. I guess I can ask you all to unmute. So if you want, you can unmute on your own. So we have our first place. We have an ice skating rink. I don't know how many of you like to go ice skating. I love ice skating, but would a service dog be allowed to go ice skating with you?
No.
I would say yes, but not on the ice because of safety.
And how about you, China?
I would also vote yes in the area, but I feel like the ice would be the sketch.
Yeah, so that's absolutely correct. So they are allowed to go into the building, but they are not allowed to be on the ice for safety issues. Sometimes there was, I believe, a court case about a woman who wanted to take her service dog up on a ski lift to go skiing with her. And unfortunately, it was ruled that the service animal was not allowed to go down the ski slopes because of safety. Now, to be honest, personally, I probably wouldn't even bring my service animal to a ice skating rink in general, just because people are walking around with blades on their feet. So I wouldn't,
I, as someone who figure skated for 16 years, I wouldn't recommend it.
yeah. So like people might not see your dog's tail, and I'd rather not have a hurt dog.
It's just a
So
disaster waiting to happen.
it is. So, this is one of the few spaces where actually they are allowed to deny. So if it compromises the safety of the area, that is something that they're allowed. So here we have a buffet. This is kind of a fancy buffet, but would a service animal be allowed to go through the buffet line with you?
Yes.
I would also vote yes, but that's just because I've seen people do it.
I'd say yes as well.
Yep, so service animals are allowed to go up to a buffet. It's the same rules as a grocery store. So they're allowed to be near food. They just cannot be in food preparation areas. So you wouldn't be allowed to go into the kitchen, for example. Or I believe we used to have Buca di Beppo here. I don't even know if they exist anymore, but they're an Italian restaurant, and you can specifically request a table in the kitchen. So you can like watch them cook while you eat, I guess. Um, Something like that, probably you wouldn't be allowed to sit back there, even though the public can, just because it is a place of food preparation. But you are allowed to go through the buffet line as much as you would like. So how about a tattoo shop?
Yes.
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 Yep, so you're right. A tattoo shop is not a sterile place, even though they might need to make sure that, their needles are sterile and things like that. But tattoo shops, you are allowed to bring your service dog. the general public can go in. You don't have to scrub up for it. You don't need to be, sanitized. So therefore, they would be allowed to be there. Um, However, a lot of people do have a lot of public access issues inside of tattoo shops. So this is a very common one where there is usually a lot of access issues. How about a cat cafe?
Sorry, I just was picturing how that would go down. But I would believe that your service animal would be trained in a way that it would be okay as long as the cats were okay.
I agree with China.
Yeah, is it one of those like maybe just because you can doesn't mean you should situations?
So actually, they're allowed to deny you from going into the cat cafe. If it compromises the safety or comfort of the animals who are there, it fundamentally alters, the business model. They are allowed to say no. However, I will say a lot of cat cafes that I have been to, the cat portion is completely separated off from the food portion. Um, in that case, you would be allowed to go in and grab a latte, but you would not be allowed to go in and be with the cats. The same thing could be seen in zoos. So zoos can actually tell you to not go into certain areas for the comfort and well-being of the animals. And but they can't deny you from like going to the gift shop or going to, the food court or anything like that. Many of the zoos, they do allow service animals, but may not allow you into places like the open air bird exhibits or near the big cats. So usually it's the big cats that can get kind of sketched out by your service dog. Okay. So that was a fun little game. You'd be surprised at how many places they can go and also can't go. So pretty much if it compromises the business in some way, so for example, like we said, a zoo, uh, the welfare of the animals who are already there are more important than the service dog, unfortunately. If it's a safety issue, so things like the ice skating rink, we don't want our dogs getting hurt and it's a safety issue. Most people like to slam into the walls at ice skating rinks or other people sometimes. So we don't want to put them in that position. And then if the area needs to be sterile. So if you are going into the NICU, for example, a service animal would not be allowed in the NICU, but your service animal can come with you to your doctor's appointment. If you're having major surgery, they can't be in the surgery room, but they can visit you after you've come out of surgery. So there are exceptions. It's not just a free for all, I have a service animal, I need to be here. Um, and it's really, really important for you to know the laws if you do want to become a service dog handler because you will be asked about these laws. You may even be on the news. A lot of handlers, when they face public access issues, will go to the news. And it's really, really important that you do know what you're talking about so that people can take you seriously. So now we're going to get into, is this for me? So there are three questions I'd like you to ask. Is one, can your dog help your disability? So not all disabilities can be helped by a service dog or service horse, miniature horse, not full-grown horse. Disabilities such as dementia, um, I would say maybe ADHD, um, and then there's probably other disabilities, but those are the two that I can think of that might not be the best treatment. Or extreme social anxiety. That's the other one. So, can a dog reasonably help you with your disability? And how I like to phrase it is if I had a person with me, what could they do to help me become more independent in my life or safe in my life? And is this something that a dog can do? So, those are some questions I would ask. Two, do you have the funds or the support to have a service dog? So, by support, I mean if you have a significant other, friends or family or roommates, you really do need a village to help you raise and train a service dog or even obtain a service dog. Uh, Through my time applying for Susquehanna, um, we had a home check, and the first thing the woman had asked my partner was, are you aware that your partner is getting a service dog? Because some people don't even ask who they live with. It's really, really important that everybody that you immediately live with is on board and then that you have the funds for training. So a lot of people, they do like to DIY it, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But, you need to have some money set aside for training. Even I, as a dog trainer, I take lots of group classes and I've taken private classes as well for when I hit a hard wall with my own dog. And so it's really, really important because nobody knows everything. And lastly, do you like dogs? So there's a lot of people, they do feel desperate and they do really want that help of being independent and especially independent from other people. But in order to have a service dog, you kind of have to like them. They're still dogs. They still pant. They still drool. They still do all the doggy things. Um, if you have a loved one in your life, perhaps you know an autistic child, it's really important that you make sure that the child enjoys dogs. Sometimes, we do get inquiries for dogs for autistic children who don't really like dogs. And in this case, it would be not the best treatment plan for that child. And there's Brew. He's being a little silly with his rainbow bandana. So what can they do? This is Penny. Penny is another one of my graduated students. She is a Vizsla, and so they can do everything from guiding the blind to being a mobile weighted blanket. There's lots of different categories that we place these service dogs in, but in the end, they are all service dogs. So here's some types of service dogs. We have guide dogs, your typical guiding eyes for the blind. They can help by helping the handler move out of harm's way. They can do stair assistance. Oh, I messed up assistance. That's fine. Crosswalk safety, and they can grab dropped items. They do all sorts of great things to keep their handlers safe. There's also mobility. So mobility dogs are dogs that help with usually movement or aiding in some way, such as grabbing items on the ground, counterbalance. So as you walk, using the dog to kind of help you as a crutch. However, that's slowly kind of being faded out. Forward momentum, which is helping you move forward. So they're not pulling, but they're just kind of providing light pressure to help you keep moving forward. They can help by remove clothing. So somebody with cerebral palsy, for example, who may not be able to take off their jacket because of dexterity, they can use a dog to help pull that jacket off. And calling emergency contacts. So a lot of clients who are fall risks, for example, if they are not at a phone or don't have a phone within reach or may be passed out, we can train dogs to call emergency contacts through like a Bluetooth device. Psychiatric is going to be your PTSD dogs, autism dogs, your, anxiety dogs, things like that. They can do things such as deep pressure therapy, which is kind of like that mobile weighted blanket. They apply pressure on your lap in order to help you ground yourself. They can do body blocking, so creating more space around you so that you don't feel as clustered. They can grab emergency medication or as needed medication. They can do behavior interruptions for like skin picking or even crying, just by either squeaking a toy or nudging the person. They can turn lights on and off, especially for those who have night terrors, just to help wake them up. And of course, hearing dogs. So hearing dogs, what they're trained to do is basically if there's a fire alarm, waking their handlers up, making sure when they cross the road, there's not a car coming, specific sound alerts. So I've had hearing dog handlers do things such as whenever their name is called, the dog nudges them to let them know somebody is calling their name. And then there's plenty more other service dogs here that I haven't listed, but these are just kind of some categories and how they can help. So the cost, and here's Steve again. And so the cost. So this is kind of the first year. We have the dog, and the dog can come from anywhere. This dog could be from the shelter, or it could be a purebred dog, or it could even be a started dog. So that's why it says 15,000 on there. Really, the cost on average, I would say, is between $2,000 and $4,000 for the dog if you're looking at a breeder. There are some private trainers who will, have kind of semi-trained dogs that they sell for a much higher price, but that's not usually what people go for. Then we have the first year of vet care, so your shots, neutering and spaying, potentially, accidents, things like that. Then we have the first year of dog training. So this is kind of group classes versus private lessons. So you can spend all the way up to $30,000 or more. However, what I usually recommend is group classes. Group classes are really wonderful if you can make it to them. They help set your dog up for success, and they're a lot cheaper. And of course, dog food and grooming. So if you have a poodle, you're going to spend a lot more on grooming than if you have a lab. Let's see. Oh, actually, let's go back here. All in all, what I find is that most people spend within the 2 or 3 years anywhere between 10 grand to 30 grand. So it is a very costly process if you are training your own dog. Now, if you're going to go through a program, which I do suggest to most people to try first, the cost can be anywhere from free to about $5,000. So it's a lot simpler just to go with a program, such as Susquehanna service dogs or canine companions and things like that. So, what about you? There's not really one correct path. The United States thankfully gives us plenty of time or plenty of options to pick from. So, we're not kind of pigeonholed into one specific path. But this also means that you need to really think about what's realistic and what can you do. Here's Augie. He's another one of my service dogs in training. He no longer wears his gentle leader, but this is a very cute picture of him getting a pup cup. So here we have service dog, and there's so many different paths to getting a service dog. You can start with a puppy, freshly 8 weeks old, hopefully no younger than that, and or with a started dog. So some people will get a puppy or I guess like a fresh new dog, like a dog that hasn't had a ton of training. Or you can get a dog who has had some basic obedience, perhaps. Maybe it was a retired show dog, or maybe it was a trainer who was selling a dog that they had started training. We have DIY or professional help. Really, DIY, I don't recommend, even if you were a professional trainer, just because it's really difficult and every dog is different. It's a really, really hard path, and there's lots of ways to mess up. So I really do suggest that you do enlist some professional help, at least for a little bit, just so that you can help tackle issues before they become bigger issues. And especially if you're dealing with things such as reactivity or aggression, it's really, really important that you address them right away. Now, we also have a private program versus ADI. So ADI is Assistance Dogs International. They are an accrediting body. And what they do is they go to charities who are handing out service dogs, and they have a set of rules and regulations that they can apply for. And the benefit of them is that they are recognized internationally. So, you know, South Korea recognizes ADI, so does the UK, so does Germany, so does the United States and Canada. So a lot of the countries, they recognize these dogs, and you have a easier chance getting into different countries with your dog. They also have a set standard, so you know that if these programs aren't going to rip you off. Now, I'm a private program and I don't place dogs. Instead, I help people train dogs. But a private program is also something that you can do as well. They are not required to have a service dog, but some people do benefit from them. There are some private programs that are strictly online, such as I think Doggy U and Delta Tails. Those are programs that are only online, and then there's me, who can be a hybrid or in person. So pros and cons. It's so important that you are going to be realistic in your choices. So, for example, if you are really struggling with money and you cannot afford getting a dog or potentially paying for that much on the first year of vet care, it might not be a smart choice to try to train your own dog. Other things is maybe you live in a household that's very toxic, or you live in a household that doesn't agree that you need a service dog. That might not be the best time to bring home a service dog. Other things that you should be realistic is, are you going to have the time to raise and train a service dog? So I typically suggest about minimum 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And so being realistic with yourself and saying, can I set aside this time for training? You're also going to need to set aside time for training instead of errands. So a lot of issues I see that pop up are folks who want to do training at a grocery store, but they also want to do errands as well. It's really difficult to do both at the same time without being frustrated or burning out your dog. So it's really, really important that you are realistic in what you can do. Another thing is, this dog is going to be a dog for the first year of their life. We really try not to put any service dog pressure on them. And if you are having a flare up, are you able to have the support to walk that dog and care for that dog? Are you going to be able to hire a dog walker? These are all really important questions to ask yourself. So, what makes a service dog? So, we have 5 levels here, and this is where you need to be spending most of your time, is level 1. This is where we socialize our dog, we build curiosity and engagement, and we are teaching age-appropriate puppy manners. So we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking for, a robotic puppy, but we really want to encourage them to have a relationship with you and to make sure that they are a well-rounded dog. Level 2, we are going to work on our intermediate manners. So things like loose leash walking, sit down, stay, come, and doing those activities in different places. So maybe we're doing them in the park. Maybe we're doing them in our driveway, and also maturity. So we want to make sure that our dogs are maturing and that they're not puppies anymore. So we really want to make sure that we are allowing them to grow and be healthy. Level 3 is pet-friendly public access. So things like practice inside of Lowe's, practice inside of your pet-friendly stores, and maybe starting tasking as games. So one of my favorite things is teaching puppies to just carry and bring things. And it doesn't matter what it is. So it could be toys, it could be your shoe, but allowing the dogs to grab things and play with tasking as just playtime skills. We're not utilizing them for any sort of help just yet. Level 4, we have our public access training and task training. So this is almost the very top of the pyramid. You can see we have a lot to go through before we even start this section. And it's really important that we don't skip sections because we want to make sure that our dog is successful and that we're not frustrated. Then level 5, we have graduation. So this is when you can say, my dog is a service dog. I don't have to carry treats everywhere. I don't have to worry about their training. Everything is good. I only need to do maintenance. So really spend more time down here than up here. And from my own personal experience, my very first service dog, I did rush them. I rushed my dog super fast. I considered her fully trained around a year and a half, and she burnt out really quick. And then she got attacked, and that was the end of her career. So with Brew, however, we just started doing public access training, and it has been so much easier. It's been really a huge difference. He's so much more confident, and I don't have to worry as much about his basic obedience skills. He walks nicely everywhere, and it's just a much better experience. So this is my sort of Q&A session. We have Steve, Starly, Alfie, and Augie. I do have more service dogs in my program. These are just the pictures I found first. But service dogs can be any breed. They don't have to be a lab or a golden. They could be a Vizsla, they could be a Chihuahua, they could be a Great Dane. But it's also really important that we sort of, expect something realistic. So if you need a guide dog, don't choose a Chihuahua. And if you plan on traveling on a lot of planes, it's probably not the best idea to choose a Great Dane. So here I'll take your questions. Just let me know kind of, anything you have, and we can take it from there. I know I talked a lot for an hour, so or half an hour.
I have a quick question about in your experience of helping people with training service dogs. Have you ever run into a situation where someone sort of figured out during the process that it wasn't right for them? And in that, is that dog then just a pet, or would they be able to be trained as still as a service dog for someone else, or is it a one and done?
So it really depends. I have had clients whose dogs didn't quite make it all the way through training, either because of behavior issues or maybe health. And so one of the things that we do is we kind of ask ourselves, like, do we need public access? And if the answer is no, then that dog can be an emotional support animal, and they can still assist in the home, but they're just not suited for public access work. For some clients, if the answer is yes, that dog just becomes a pet, and then we find a new dog and we start all over again. And so it's kind of the dangers of, not going through a program that places dogs is that your dog very much and can, not make it through training. Um, there's only so much that we can do, and they are living, breathing beings. So we don't want to force them to do something that they're miserable doing.
Follow up with that. If then you had a situation where that dog just wasn't able to perform all the way to the top, and then you have that pet and you go for another one, is there ever any kind of strangeness between the two and how they receive attention or awarding? Are there ways to make sure both dogs feel included, but obviously one is working and one is just hanging out?
So usually the dogs are pretty fine with that. For example, a lot of the dogs who did, fail the program, they actually wanted to just be couch dogs and pet dogs anyway. So they ended up just being happier in general because that's what they wanted to do, in life. And I do think, making sure that you're ready for a multi-dog household is another question. So there are some people who do rehome their dog. So, let's say they get a Labrador puppy, they tried really hard, but this lab puppy is just really, really like anxious about children. And we really cannot have a dog who's anxious about children for public access because children will hug your dog without your permission. Ask me how I know. Brew and Fee have been hugged by many, many children who just come out of nowhere. So, um, in that case, if you're not ready for a multi-dog household, then we would talk about rehoming.
Mm,
And most people, they would appreciate having a mostly well-trained dog, so it's not the worst.
sure.
And usually you can like work with the breeder or we can work something out. Um, Dogs do fail in big organizations as well. So organizations such as Canine Companions, I believe their failure rate is somewhere between 50 and 60%. So
Okay.
those dogs who don't make it through training end up being homed as pets.
Thank you.
No problem. Or they get home to do different jobs. Like there was one dog, I have a friend who works for Can Do Canines, and sometimes there's a dog who has like way too much enthusiasm, and that dog just went ahead and became like a detection dog instead because they were better suited for scent work, for
Mm.
detecting things, versus like being a service dog for somebody who has, diabetes.
I have a question. I think so. Hearing that canine companions has a 60% failure rate for dogs that were specifically bred and started in the most appropriate way, I would imagine, to start this potential journey, to hear that that many are failing, I'm a little concerned that my dog might also go on to be not a candidate. So, what measures do you use to determine whether or not a pet that you currently have could go on to be a service dog, or if like you would need to just start over fresh with a puppy and try it that way?
Yeah, so to be completely honest, their failure rate might be also a little bit higher because they will also, wash dogs who are, again, maybe like too enthusiastic about breeding and things like that, because they are, again, providing a service where they are giving these people fully trained dogs. So there's a little less wiggle room, versus, trying to work through problems. They also have a plethora of dogs to choose from, so they're it's easier, a little bit easier for them to say like, oh, this dog is better here. Um, Versus like when I'm helping people owner train, it's like, okay, well, this dog isn't necessarily perfect, but we're willing to kind of take some of those setbacks as long as they don't put the public in danger or the handler in danger. Um, but some things that I do to make sure that the dog is successful is I require a canine good citizen before anybody even thinks about service dog work. And this is one of the biggest ways. I find that dogs who can earn their canine good citizen have a much higher chance at becoming service dogs than if we didn't try that. So setting milestones like making sure you have a canine good citizen, and then you can even do the canine good citizen advanced or urban, Um, and if your dog can hit these milestones, then you can say, okay, this dog can go further. Other things that I do is always seek out a third party as your sort of unbiased eyes. So even I do that where, I tell people, I say, you know, is my dog happy? Like, I want my dog to be happy. I want my dog to love this work. But in your opinion, is my dog enjoying this? And, before you get 2 years into the hole of like, oh, I've been training my dog for 2 years and I threw all this money into training, only to find out, yeah, my dog hates this. So, that's what I would do is just make sure that you have these milestones. And I have these milestones for my students as well. So I say, at this point, your dog should know this or be able to do this. And if they can't meet this, then we have to have that conversation before you start spending more money. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
No, it did. That was great. I think that my dog would be a candidate. If I am interested in moving forward, would we go ahead and set up an evaluation with you just to like get that ball rolling, see like your, unbiased opinion, that third party? Hi.
yeah, so we can definitely get an evaluation done. And, I also encourage people like if you don't want me to do the Canine Good Citizen, we have so many really wonderful trainers here in Pittsburgh that give the Canine Good Citizen test. So, even if you wanted to go even like one step removed, we have plenty of folks who can do that. And once they get the Canine Good Citizen, then I sort of evaluate them again and kind of look at, where you are. Is this dog suitable? And my number one priority is the safety of you, is the safety of the public. And then secondly is can this dog, be reliable in public and actually do tasking? Because you'd be surprised at how many people bring dangerous dogs into the public. We do here at Phenomenal Canine, we do twice a year TSA training trips at the airport, at the Pittsburgh airport. And the TSA agents every time are like, we are so glad you're here. We can practice what to do when a service dog comes in. We almost got bit like 6 times this week. So you would be surprised at how many people do bring dogs who are not suited for service work into public.
That's one of my biggest fears of turning my dog into a service dog is just putting him into positions where he could potentially be bit by not appropriate service dogs.
Yeah, and so a lot of the training I do in public is like how to mitigate that, how to keep yourself and your dog safe. And another thing is that during training, at least with my students, we really put them through the ringer. So, I have my German Shepherd who is now a washed service dog. She's retired. She is dog reactive, not aggressive, but reactive. And one of the things I do is I take my Shepherd out and we train around her. And so, making sure that your dog or my students' dogs can handle being barked at, because we can't control the public, we can't control our environment, but we can control to some extent our dogs and ourselves. Um, but, that's like the big thing. I will say though, it's a little overblown. Like, I think as a service dog handler, the chances of your dogs being attacked are pretty low, to be honest. My service dog was attacked because a family member of mine did not tell me that their dog was dog aggressive. So this wasn't even like public access. This was me going over to a family member's house. So, um, but if you were in a position as a gatekeeper, so like TSA, a store employee, things like that, your chances of, your service dog or you yourself being bit kind of go a lot higher versus if you're just like a patron inside of a store, you can kind of walk away or move away.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. Um, did you guys have any other questions for me or anything that I missed out on?
I think I'm personally good. I also just absorbed all of that wonderful information you gave Olivia.
There's there's so much that we can talk about. This is just kind of skimming the surface of, what it is to have a service dog. I will say I call myself kind of a last resort option, to be honest. So Really, the first option, if you can, is going through an ADI organization. They are trustworthy and it is the cheapest way of getting a service dog. However, I do recognize that it's not always the right path for people. For example, I am disabled. I have PTSD and I am not a veteran. And so the amount of organizations that cater to civilians with my disability are pretty low. And the amount of organizations who will let me have a organization dog with an intact dog is zero. So in my case, my only option is to sort of, train with a professional's help, or, in my case, I am DIYing, but I am still hiring people for when I get stuck as well. Um, Other disabilities that often are stuck in this kind of no man's land are autistic adults. A lot of organizations do not place autism dogs for anybody above the age of, I think, 16. I think a lot of them cut off at 16, not even 18.
Just because of a funding issue?
Yeah, so it's all about funding. And if you think about it, a lot of these organizations are charities, and you have to think about what brings in money. So veterans, they bring in lots of money. Everybody wants to support the troops. You know, children are cute. Everybody loves, or most people like children, not everybody, but a lot of people like children. And if you see a sad child, you want to fix that. And the unfortunate truth is that autistic adults do make people uncomfortable. And it's just a lot harder to get funding for that. Same thing with PTSD, like civilian PTSD is really hard to get funding for it just because, it's people just are less sympathetic for that disability. Um, if, I have had inquiries for people who want guide dogs, and guide dogs are some of the most well-funded organizations because they were the first service dogs that existed. So I always direct them towards Guiding Eyes or I think, is it called Leader Dogs? There's a lot of those organizations. But yeah, I'm sort of that last resort option, just because otherwise you'd have to DIY it completely. And when I first started this journey as a service dog handler 10 years ago, it's been a while, um, it was awful. I hated it. And that's why I kind of created Phenomenal Canine, was because I didn't want somebody to be in the same position that I was, where I was just kind of flailing around and being like, is this right? Is this right? I don't know what I'm doing. So, um, I'm really here just to kind of be that resource.
Thank you for
Uh,
that. I sympathize and empathize with those feelings, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you.
No problem. I someday hope to be able to place dogs. Just living in a very tiny Pittsburgh house is not conducive to raising puppies. So when you already have two big dogs. Um, but yeah, it's a really tough journey. Like it's not easy. Um, oh, that was a weird noise. I don't know if you guys could hear that. Um, but it's definitely, I say, if you like dogs and you like training, it's definitely worth it. Um, but if you guys have any questions past this, feel free to email me. I'm the easiest to email, and if I don't answer your email, just email me again. Just keep bothering me. I'll answer. Sometimes, I just get busy and I forget, or I mean to respond and I don't. But you can always email me in case you have any questions beyond this. And if you need anything, I'm always happy to be a resource, even if it's like, I really want to go through an organization and I don't want to train my own dog. Where can I go? I'm happy to send you a million resources your way.
I actually do have another question real quick. And it's only because you mentioned intact versus not. In training service dogs, do you find one to be more agreeable to the training versus the other?
Not really. So there's no law saying that service dogs have to be neutered or spayed.
Yeah.
Just, in my time in the space, a lot of service dogs do more than just be service dogs. So there are lots of people who compete in conformation like I do who do have service dogs. So their dogs just remain intact.
Oh.
It is definitely a responsibility to ensure that you aren't making puppies by accident. So, for example, if I wanted a female dog in the future, making sure that my dog doesn't get to them, it automatically bars my dog from going to daycares or a lot of dog boarding places. So sometimes it's just not financially feasible for people to keep their dogs intact.
Mm.
However, whether or not you want your dog to stay intact or be neutered or spayed is definitely a conversation I would have with your vet, or a vet, just kind of what works best for you and what age. I think nowadays, like the larger breeds, they're saying like 1 to 2 years old is when you should neuter or spay, versus the smaller breeds like beagles and chihuahuas. They're kind of like anytime's fine.
Thank you.
No
You
problem.
mentioned that a lot of service dogs do multiple activities or sports or things. Would therapy work kind of make them not the best service dog candidate because they're used to being friendly and going up to other people? Or is that something that could be managed and trained?
So I definitely think it can be managed and trained. Dogs are incredibly smart, sometimes too smart. So for example, Brew, he does fast cat, and that is an activity where he is chasing a plastic bag. He is very amped up for it. He is pulling, he is like excited about this activity. But if he sees the same trash bag while he's working, outside because somebody, I don't know, dropped out of their car, he doesn't have the same reaction because he knows that it's very context specific. And I do think service dogs can be therapy dogs at the same time. The only thing that would stop you, however, is I believe some organizations do not allow service dogs to be therapy dogs. So I know Therapy Dogs International does not. They have a blanket rule that service dogs are not allowed to be therapy dogs. However, I think Therapy Dogs Alliance or Alliance of Therapy Dogs, I don't think they have that same rule.
Awesome. Good to know. We've just been on a therapy dog training
Mhm.
plan so far, and I wasn't sure if that was like, okay, too late. He's too friendly.
No, no, that's perfectly fine. In fact, at least in Pittsburgh, we have lots of really wonderful therapy dog classes, and I think they set up dogs very nicely for becoming service dogs. Um, but yeah, service dogs can do most other things. They can do all sorts of sports, such as rally obedience, dock diving, conformation. You know, maybe not search and rescue. I think search and rescue might be a little bit hard, but or bite work. So bite work is another one where I do not train dogs who have been doing bite work for service work. And even though it is a sport and they're not really like attack dogs, sometimes they can cross over. Sometimes, they might see Santa at the mall and be like, that looks like a man in a bite suit. Um, so that's one sport where I probably wouldn't double dip.
Cool, thank you.
No problem. Um, Aunt, did you have anything you wanted to ask before we wrap this up?
I did, but I'll message you on Discord.
That works. So, if you guys have any questions, again, just email me. I'm an open book. I love talking about this stuff. But otherwise, I really appreciate you guys for joining me, and hopefully, I can talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
No
you.
problem. You guys have a nice night.
You
You
too.
too.